What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect, and welcome back to the channel. Now, we've got the second round of the draft to get into here, along with some winners and two-way thoughts at the end. Now, the second round is often where the posturing and negotiating for spots and contracts goes up a level from round one. Sometimes guys just fall because they're not as appealing as prospect as I or you might think for one reason or another. But you always got to factor in that search for different contracts and being in good positions when talking guys who fall and even some decisions that teams make. Now, we won't spend as much time as the first round, and I'm not putting the trade details in here because there's a whole lot going on that's just excessive, but we'll get to everything and again talk some undrafted stuff at the end. Now, Rasheer Fleming quickly became the sort of prize with the first pick in the second round. I know some were more split on him as the year progressed, but it seemed he was a guy that everyone was clamoring for, and the Suns ended up moving up a couple times to get him at 31. His athleticism, his length, and defensive versatility should be felt here, and as long as the shot is solid, I think all the field concerns or playmaking will be less of an issue for him to make an impact at the NBA level. And I think he makes a lot of sense in an effort to try to build around Devin Booker in these next few years. Now, Boston was rumored to be interested in Fleming at 32. Who knows how much validity there is there, but they traded out of this spot to Orlando, who ended up taking another guy I would have picked in the first round in Noah Penda. Now, Noah doesn't add shooting here, but he's one of the best defenders in the class, a steady connected playmaker, and a big physical body. So I love the value at 32, and getting him and Jace where they did was pretty good work, even paying quite a bit to trade up here in the beginning of the second round. Now, the Hornets actually kept both of their second round picks and took two solid vets in Sion James and Ryan Kalkbrenner. Sion's game as an all-around high-level compliment is exactly the type of guy that I've been wanting them to take these last couple years. I might have went with Adu Thero here, but it'd be hard for me to dislike Sion going anywhere, especially this Charlotte situation. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner was the easy choice at 34, given they don't have any centers right now, and though he's old, he's arguably the best drop big in the class with a proven track record as a play finisher. So in full, Khan, Liam, these two, it's a much different roster than they had recently, but I think this was a step in the right direction. Janai Broome ended up going to Philly at 35. He's one of the most productive and analytics-friendly prospects I've seen, and has good touch, is physical, has good feel on both ends, and for that he certainly has a chance to contribute in this front court. Now, he's a pretty poor athlete and a bit of a tweener, but I would have said the same thing about him the last several years, and he's continued to be one of the best players in the country. So again, this is another spot I might have gone elsewhere, but he is definitely worth considering in this range. Now, the Lakers had themselves a very good time trading up to 36 to get Adu Thero, and I think this could end up being one of the best values in the entire class. His athleticism and defense on the wing are serious draws, and LA specifically has needed a boost in both departments for a long time. Now, the lack of a shot might actually get highlighted here more when you play with two players who attract as much attention as Luka and Bron, and how important it is to be able to knock down shots from the corner and play well off spot ups if you're not a center. But he's at least got the potential to continue progressing as a shooter, and at this point in the draft is very low risk, and I would have considered him throughout the first round. Now, the Pistons picked up a shooter in Chaz Lanier out of Tennessee. It felt like a good chance they were going to take one of him, Kobe Brea, and maybe Maxime Reynaud at the 5. I still think that direction would have been interesting, but Lanier matches a lot of what they found success in around Cade this last year, and he's a big time shooter who can do it off of movement and has the type of physicality that should fit in the league. Now, another one of my favorite picks in this entire draft was Indiana taking Cam Jones at 38. I was a little higher on Cam than his stock seemed to be late in the year, but I like this value, and Indiana feels like a spot that he could pop in a significant way. He can play both guard spots. He's got decent size. I think there's a lot of synergy there with he and Nembhard, and with Halliburton out probably all of next year, it could be the perfect opportunity for him to actually make an early impact. So I think this is a better situation than anything he could have gotten in the first round, and I'd be ecstatic if I was him. Now, Elijah Martin at 39 to Toronto was a little high for me personally. I still like him. He's an excellent defender, an absolute dog, a proven winner even before he got to Florida. So it's hard to dislike, especially when we start to get into this 40s range. But he is just a 6'2 off guard who's been a little limited as a creator and has never been super convincing as a shooter to me. And with Jamal Shead there, I'd wonder how they do incorporate both. But there are a lot of people who love him and are much higher on him than me. Now, all the guards that had to play Toronto in Summer League, you better mentally prepare yourself. You better mentally prepare yourself and get plenty of rest for that one, because they also got Chucky Hepburn on a two-way too. So good luck, and you might have to do some 80s style Magic Johnson back downs from about 70 feet out. The Pelicans took Georgetown's Micah Peavy at 40. I've been a big fan of Peavy's wing defense and his activity on that end, and also his jump as a shooter and overall offensive player this year. This is a bit of a weird spot for everyone, but I thought it was reasonable for this part of the draft. And it's funny because we start to see a bit of a pattern in the guys that New Orleans brought in. Outside of Fears, maybe it's a coincidence, but if you have DMV ties in any way, your chances of being a Pelican might increase a little bit more. Now, Kobe Bryant to the Suns was a really fun one. He's a lights out shooter and someone that teams should be able to get creative with in how they use him in the NBA. A team that's taken Malawach, Fleming, Ryan Dunn, and Oso Ighodaro last year, it definitely makes sense to go in the opposite direction and get someone with shooting as their elite skill, and I think he'll have a decent shot to break through for that reason. Now, Maxime Reynaud ended up falling all the way down to 42 in Sacramento, and I was pretty surprised considering the buzz that was coming out of the combine, and obviously he was in that late first round tier for me. He's pretty clearly the most intriguing stretch big in the class and a talented offensive player. It's just those defensive flaws that I'm sure turn teams off, considering he's not a truly elite shooter. Sacramento is another one of those teams you can't really assess as a whole, but taking the current roster construction out of it, I love the value and would consider him one of the better picks of the entire draft. Another pick that I really liked was Jameer Watkins to the Wizards. His physicality on defense and as a slasher on a wing is perfect for what they need, and yeah, he's a bit of an older prospect, but you kind of need that considering how young most of this roster is that isn't named Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, or CJ McCollum, so I definitely think he fits in really well to this group. Brooks Barnhizer was a bit of a surprise pick here for OKC. There's not a lot of room for even Thomas Sorber to play a ton immediately, so I don't think any second round pick was gonna mean that much for them, but he's a dog who was super productive this year. He's got great hands, makes plays on both ends of the floor. He probably would have been valued more had he been healthy all year. He was great before he went down. He's older and he just can't shoot much. Now again, OKC doesn't have many paths for him to contribute, but we'll see what happens. The Timberwolves taking Rocco Zikarsky here was another surprise, considering they took Berenger in the top 20. I don't hate having two swings at a long-term Rudy replacement, and a 7'3" guy who has shown what he has both defensively and finishing plays at a pro level at a young age is definitely worth being in this range. I would more question the process with the first pick if you knew someone like Rocco was going to be available to. I would more question the process with the first pick if you knew someone like Rocco was going to be available to trade back from 31 and get, just from a maximizing AMP perspective and accounting for where they might be at cap-wise these next couple years. But they could also stash Rocco, and that could make this a little more palatable. Amari Williams was a favorite of mine down the stretch, and he ended up in Boston. I really like his combo of physicality, rebounding, and playmaking from the 5 spot, and with them likely being a bit light here in the front court heading into the year, I could see him getting some real minutes and maybe even a standard contract at some point. So this was another one of my favorites in the second round. I think they'll be able to get creative with how they use him if he does get some time. The Bucks took Bogoljub Markovic, and this was an interesting one. I like it considering he fell quite a bit from where I would have considered him. He's got a ton of talent as a 6'11" guy who can dribble, shoot, and make a play. He produced well in a pretty good league. Now, GM Milt Newton said he's unsure if they'll stash him or not, so we'll see what happens there. If I'm Milwaukee trying to maximize Giannis in this short window, I probably would have went Javon Small or Tyrese Proctor if I could, but as a talent swing and what is a bit of an unknown future for them, I like it, and if he does come over, hopefully he gets an opportunity. Now, speaking of, Javon Small to the Grizzlies was very much on brand for everybody over there. I like Small a lot. He reminds me some of Scottie Pippen Jr. in some ways, but even as a small guard, I don't think that they could turn down his talent at 48. I thought he deserved to go top 40, and that moment with his grandfather cheering him on was probably one of the top reactions that we've seen for the draft. So definitely excited for him to get this opportunity. Tyrese Proctor at 49 to the Cleveland Cavaliers was a definite steal. Now, there's a caveat because it was reported he was seeking a guaranteed deal, and a team like Cleveland with limited cap flexibility actually happened to be one of these late second teams that would be willing to do that. And I think they could absolutely use a young talent like Proctor here, and I wouldn't be surprised if he cracked the rotation as a bigger complementary guard and someone that you can envision playing next to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Kobe Sanders went to the Clippers as a big playmaking wing with some skills as a pull-up shooter. I wouldn't have too many expectations on him, but I think he's at least interesting, and it's a great story going from Cal Poly to eventually the NBA. Moji Awara ended up on the Knicks as a stash pick. He's someone that had to be towards the top of the list for stash options, considering the lack of robust international talent in this class, and he profiles well as a 6'8 forward with a 7'4 wingspan and upside as a defender, and being one of Pacom Dadier's close friends doesn't hurt either. Alex Tui ended up in Golden State at 52. I definitely thought he'd end up going a little higher than this. I like his feel, his size, and activity on defense. He's not a great athlete or someone that you can rely on as a shooter, and I think we talked about this in the board, but because he doesn't have an elite skill, those guys can go one of two directions because teams really start to value that when you get later in the draft. But at this point, I like it, and I think that he has the type of size and feel to potentially figure some things out here in Golden State. Utah continued their solid night with Wisconsin's John Tonje. Feels like a whole lot of bucket getting over there still, but I think he's basically the best talent available, so you don't really have to consider anything else much. Now, Talon Peter. This is about as surprising a domestic draft pick that I've seen. Respect to him. I actually happened to watch him super early in the season because my brother played against Liberty, but I never would have guessed that he'd get drafted, even after watching them in the tournament. And he's a former D2 guy at Arkansas Tech, put up some good numbers there and maintained that efficiency this year. But yeah, I mean, Indiana clearly had a ton of confidence in him, especially considering he didn't even get a Portsmouth invite. So I'm very curious to see just who he ends up being, even if it is just a G League guy or somebody who has some success overseas. Now, Lachlan Olbrich is a fun pick in Chicago. He's a crafty forward who is one of those guys who, again, just knows how to play, even with some important questions. And he'll have a likely friend in fellow Aussie Josh Giddey next year. Will Richard ended up in Golden State late here after a few trades. He made some big plays on the championship team. He shoots, he can defend as a smaller wing. Definitely been on radars for a few years, so he has some intrigue as a two-way guy for me for sure. Max Schulga went to Boston at 57, and I really like this pick too. Thought Boston did a very good job on the margins in this draft. Now, it'll obviously remain to be seen how everything plays out to actually determine how successful everyone is, but Schulga's an impressive guard who can shoot it, processes the game well, and makes plays. He'll also be on a two-way and will have to prove himself as an athlete and defender, but I think it's a great bet to make. Seilu Niang was a stash pick for Cleveland here. He's got some interesting tools as an athlete. He ended up in my top 100. Definitely a long-term stash play here. I probably would have gone in a different direction if the contracts would allow it, but yeah. And then with the last pick, Memphis stayed true to the brand and took an in-state kid who was one of the best defenders in college basketball in Jemiah Mashack. I kind of think that might end up being one of those home run picks. I've been skeptical of the offense ever being good enough, but if he can get there from 3 one day and that's it, he's going to be that type of dog that everyone hates going up against, and he's one of those guys who embodies what the Grizzlies have been, since the grit and grind era. Now, before we go, let's get into some of these two-ways and undrafted guys. If you're still here, you're a bit of a crazy individual, but you're good with me forever, I promise. RJ Lewis Island is pretty empty over here, but I'm here, and so are the Utah Jazz. They got him on a two-way, and I think his athleticism, his defense on the wing, and some shot making were worth taking a chance on. If I'm him, I probably would have liked to collect $2 million and almost certainly get at worst a two-way after next year, but maybe that'll serve as the motivation for him to go even harder in his work. Hunter Salas ended up in Philly. I think that's a good pickup. I know people are talking about him as also a cautionary tale of returning, but I'm not 100% sure his interest was as high as it might have seemed last year, but I'm glad to see him get picked up. Vlad Golden in Miami is a good pickup as well. He probably doesn't play a ton there, but he has some potential as a third big and definitely gives them some extra size. Tamar Bates in Denver makes a ton of sense. I love what he brings as an off guard who defends, knocks down shots, and would theoretically be at his best next to someone like a Jokic. Dallas sneakily picking up Ryan Nembhard I think is excellent and could end up being one of the better moves from this class. I love what he does as a playmaker, and he might be able to break through there. And then I also think getting a shooter the caliber of Miles Kelly on their other two-way is a good move as well. Mark Sears in Milwaukee could be a sneaky one, and I like the balance of a Dylan Cardwell on a two-way in Sacramento. It should be nice to have his versatility around, even if he never really plays. Now, I appreciate y'all for watching another year of the draft with me over here at Hoop Intellect. things have been buzzing in a big way lately, so I'm very appreciative of y'all continuing to give me the platform to put this stuff out for y'all. Yeah, if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and comment down below who your favorite pick in the second round actually was. As always, I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.